So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And today I'm delighted that we have back with us Nicki Mitchell, who's partner at Jones Myers Family Law. So Nicki, thank you so much for spending a bit more time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and Jones Myers to the audience, what you do and how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So I'm Nicki Mitchell. I am a partner at Jones Myers. We're a niche family law practice. We've got offices in Leeds, Harrogate, and for the last 4 years now, York. Brilliant. So that's where I came into it 4 years ago. Because I practiced in York and I've grown up in York and kind of York through and through, like a stick of rock. So this opportunity arose to open the office 4 years ago. So we've been here ever since. And we're small but growing. We're small but beautifully formed, of course, I would say that. But yeah, so we're growing slowly. There's 5 of us in the team now. There were 3 of us that came across, and we are looking. The next step is the children team, because the firm's divided into 2 sections. Not that clients particularly need to know that, but for our purposes, we've got real specialisms within children law, particularly public law, so anything to do with the state care proceedings and so on, but also disputes between parents about children issues. And then the finance team, so we focus on divorce and the financial settlements that flow from divorce. Yeah, so that's us really.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And, we spoke last year about where you were and what was going on. And I'm keen to know what's changed for you in the business since we last spoke.
So, well, here in York, we've got a little bit bigger. So we've recruited. We've actually got a trainee, which is
great.
It's something that Jones Myers hasn't had for quite a long time. And I've had trainees before, but in a bigger more structured organisation. So it's been quite nice, really. So Harriet's joined us, and she's great, and she's going to go on to do great things. But it's been interesting for me, being her principal and spending a lot of time with her. And you realise, one of my colleagues, Norman Taylor, he always used to say it takes 25 years to get 25 years experience. And I've realised working with Harriet how true that is, that people she's so keen and she's so good and she's desperate to move on and do things. But you think, actually, I do know quite a lot more than 25 or 30 years ago. And so it's been a realisation of how much knowledge and confidence you acquire. Really interesting then, taking on board her enthusiasm, and it kind of rubs the cynicism off the edges a bit sometimes, which is not bad.
But it is really valuable, the mentoring of people we can pass on a lot of that experience a lot more quickly, if that makes sense. Absolutely. You only get 25 years experience in 25 years. But if we accelerate that learning from that experience, I think that's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah. I think the hardest thing, and I've found this previously as well, working with younger people trying to bring them on, is at what point do you stop being that support and that mentor? We don't stop being the mentor, but at what point do you say, right, you just have to do it now? There has to be a first time when they go to court on their own with the client and there's nobody there, they're not sitting and watching somebody else. And I remember how scary that was, despite the fact it was about 100 years ago. So, and that's difficult, I think, for both of you to let go when you're developing a relationship of trust. But yeah, it's interesting. So that's probably for me been, it's been quite an important thing. The other thing that we've moved offices since we last spoke.
Okay, yeah.
So we were in rented premises and we bought now.
Brilliant.
So we're just on the other side of the town centre, just off Bootham. And it's great. So it went from a dank shell to what we wanted it to be. And it's great. It's absolutely lovely. And we've had loads of lovely feedback from people, clients like it. We can see from the wallpaper that we've tried to make the client bits as comfortable and interesting as possible. And then we've got a kind of fairly standard open plan working space, but it works for us because we've been able to put, well, and it's also I like that. I like a bit of designing things, and so we work with some really good people who designed the space and worked with them really well. So that's been great. It's very time consuming and stressful at times, but
Yes.
it's been really good.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. And what would you say are some of the sort of key challenges that you've had to address? I guess moving one.
Well, yeah, that's certainly been a massive one because there was a lot of planning and
yes,
you know, a lot of things to take into account that you know you don't really think of. It's also about trying to make sure that we remain coherent across the firm and don't split off and become, you know, the York team. We do try and work quite hard at that, but
yes,
you know, when there's a lot of investment going on in one particular part of it, you've got to be really aware of that. And I think the other thing for us has been, like for everybody else in business, really, has been that transition back to some form of normality after COVID. I mean, it's incredible what an impact it's had, isn't it? Really, that's still coming to light. And you know, different people, different ideas. Some people love working from home. Some people hate it. I mean, I'm quite fortunate in York that nobody really likes it, so everybody comes in. Which is, it just makes it easier, right?
Yep.
There's flexibility, people work from home, but yeah, that's been a challenge at partnership level to just try and get that right and take into account what the people are doing, what's working, what isn't. But there's been such a massive change in so many ways.
yes.
I'm chair of governors at a secondary school, local secondary school, and the impact on young people is so far reaching. I mean, there are real issues with, especially with students in kind of year 10, year 11, because when they made that transition to secondary school, they didn't really have a transition.
Yeah.
So, you know, the impact of that is still being seen and isn't properly understood yet, but never ceases to amaze me how I think we'll look back in years to come and think, blimey, you know, be studies as to what impact it's had on people psychologically, and, you know, that kind of thing. So it's been, yeah, that transition has taken some management, but I
can absolutely, it's certainly, I'm seeing in obviously working with lots of different businesses, the impact in different ways. And I think one thing that's clear is, you know, we are in, for want of a better word, a new norm. We're not going back to exactly we were before, and I don't think that's going to happen. It may end up close to for many businesses, but I think almost every business has changed in some way, and most businesses are working from home at least part of some weeks.
Yeah. I know it's and you know, it's universal but different for everybody, isn't it?
Yes, same, exactly right. It's the same issues, but dealt in different way, different people. You know, some people embrace and actually like that, as you said, working from home. Some people actively need to be around other people on a regular basis for you know, for the mental health, and it's quite a difficult thing, I think, isn't it, as a you know, leading and running a business, to find the best way forward for the business and for the team.
Well, it's the same thing, really. In what we do, it is the same thing, because what we provide is a legal service. So, you know, if our people aren't happy, then we don't have a business, really.
Yep.
So it's to some extent that applies to everybody, but yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Brilliant. So we obviously talked about you've moved offices, you've increased the team. What other wins would you say you've had over the last 12 months?
I can't remember where we were last time we spoke. Whether it was we won a couple of awards. I think we probably got one of them by the time we spoke.
Brilliant. Yes.
So we got the LexisNexis Family Law Firm North Award. So it's a national. LexisNexis are a big provider of legal information systems, and they have an awards thing. So we won that in 2020, and then we won it again in 21. which we thought there was no chance, but we thought we'd go down and see what happened. So we won that again. So that's been a real boost. And one of our partners, actually, Cape Manager, won an award last year as well. So yeah, we've been doing quite well, I think, really, overall.
I mean, I think, you know, winning awards is great, but repeatedly winning awards, I think, really demonstrates the consistency of the approach. And it's you know, it's not luck to win one, but it's sort of almost like, as you said, winning one, we're not going to win it again. But clearly, that's a demonstration of consistent delivery, consistent excellence. It's got to,
well, I hope so. I mean, I'm naturally a bit cynical about these things, because you have to put your own submission forward and everything. But at the same time, you know, we've got a lot of good things to say. So I've been around a long time now, so I've been qualified nearly 30 years, and I've worked in, I don't know, 4 or 5 different practices, and I can honestly say that this is the strongest family team I've ever worked with. So, you know, I think I do feel more able to sing our praises because there's more to say. Yeah. You know what I mean? So yeah, yes. Tempered with a little bit of cynicism, because you have to put yourself forward, etc. But you know, you don't pay anybody for it. It's a genuine assessment by judges.
No, that's brilliant, and a bit of healthy cynicism is always useful.
Plenty of that here.
And how good would you say you are at celebrating your wins?
Not very. I mean, we do put stuff out there, social media and all the rest of it, in that way. But in terms of celebrating, we talk a lot about doing it, and actually getting round to doing it, we're less good at. We have got a kind of social thing coming. They're always great when we get together. It takes some doing because people live all over the place. Yes. And we generally meet up in Leeds, and we've got one coming up actually. But you know, we always say when something like this happens, yeah, we'll have a celebration. But yeah, we could do better on that, certainly.
I find it really important for both individuals, but the teams themselves, because it's a bit like, you know, resilience is about drawing on, you know, being able to push through challenging times by being you know, but we need to draw on things, and part of the things we need to draw on is that sort of putting into the bank account that those successes. Yes, we are great. Yes, okay, you know, we're doing well. And if we don't, then, you know, the challenge, if we don't put it in, we like a bank account, we haven't got anything to draw out. That makes any sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
But we find busy business people, you know, spend most of the time thinking about what they haven't done rather than what they have done.
Definitely. Well, it's just nose to the grindstone as well, isn't it? The client care has to come first. If the phone rings, you have a list as long as your arm of non-fee earning things to do when the phone rings, and it's somebody new and who needs something, then that's what happens. That takes priority.
That's true. However, self-care is important to be able to deliver the level of quality of service. I love the analogy, you know, on a plane, if the cabin ever depressurized, which hopefully it never will, they always say you've got to put your mask on before you help somebody else. And I think
I don't disagree with you at all, but I'm just saying, good at the theory, not so great at the practice.
Well, that's absolutely fine. I think it's just, you know, instead of getting into the habit. One thing you could do that we've done so very often in many of the organisations we work with is appoint a celebration officer, appoint somebody, the person that loves to celebrate most, and say, look, we'll tell you when we have some fun, when something we've achieved, and you go and organise something to celebrate it. And
that's a good idea. I can think of one person that won't be in the partnership.
Well, we won't go there. Then.
It wouldn't be our managing partner.
And that's okay, and that's sort of a real great indication of, yes, that's probably why we don't get around to it, because we're focused on other things. But somebody else would probably love that idea of, you know, let's collect the wins and celebrate.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I might suggest that.
Brilliant.
Quite like the title as well.
It's great. Well, we've had CFOs, chief fund officers, we've had CCOs, chief celebration officer, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, come up with your own title and just have some fun with it. I think it works. It works really well. So looking back over the last year, the wins you've had, the challenge you've had, what would you say the biggest things you've learned over the last year about business in general?
I think, despite the fact that things change, it's quite relentless, isn't it? Sometimes there are so many. You can't rest on your laurels. There are so many things, so many plates you need to keep spinning. If you take your eye off the ball, there's far too many metaphors in there. Sorry, but spinning plates and balls. But something goes wrong. You kind of need to be in a constant state of awareness. And I think sometimes you think, oh, I've been doing this for such a long time. I've done this, that, and the other. But actually, and that's what keeps you interested, is that you realise that you do have to keep an eye on how everything's going and how everybody's doing. And, the whole, thankfully, I don't need to look after the finance piece. That is definitely not the celebration officer. He does that. He is our resident EO. But I think it's just that because I do like change, and you focus on a change and then you're back to the norm or a slightly different norm, but it's the constant thing is just hard work and awareness, I think.
It's sort of accepting that this is how it is, but doing our best to make it enjoyable and valuable, and going back to that self-care idea, is breaking it up at the right point with whatever that be, whether it's celebration or just some rest, some change. But also
keeping good people. We've got some really good people, and we've had change over the last year, but we've got to keep them. It's quite competitive out there, especially with younger family lawyers. And so we've got to make sure that they want to stay.
Yeah,
and that's a challenge constantly.
Yeah, I find that a lot, and I think that's about becoming or maintaining that level of attractiveness as an organisation. Is making ourselves somewhere people want to come and stay, and it's a constant thing. I often one thing I think has changed over the last. It probably was pre-COVID, but I think COVID, whatever reason, has exacerbated it. Is keeping people, and a lot of businesses will spend time attracting and retaining great clients. So they'll do great marketing for clients, make sure they're the right people. They'll do things for clients to stay with them. But really nowadays, I think we've got to do exactly the same things for our team, for our employees. So we've got to attract them well, but also do things to keep them, because like clients, employees will come and go unless they've got a reason to stay. I think it becomes really important. So if you remember last time, Nicki, I love to collect any quotes or sayings that you say a lot. As you said, we've used a few metaphors already, but is there anything you catch yourself saying on a regular basis in or about business or life in general?
Oh, that's a good question. What did I say last time? I won't be able to remember that one.
It doesn't matter to say one. If you say one, it means it doesn't.
I can't remember. I can't remember. I mean, I've got into the habit of saying it takes 25 years to get 25 years of experience. I do like that. I don't know. There's all kinds of rubbish I trot out all the time, but I just can't think of anything.
That's all good. It's all good. So some people just have things that they know they always say, and it brings a bit of a smile. But
Nobody's died. I use a lot.
Well, it's
just that kind of trying. It's a high pressure job. This we get an awful. We're in the middle of conflict all the time.
Yes,
and that conflict, it comes from indirectly from clients. Me as a mediator, I sit right squarely in the middle of it for a lot of my week.
Yes.
But also we get you get pressure from the court, you get pressure from solicitors on the other side. So trying to get that perspective, and we all do it at different times. There are different cases that push buttons for whatever reason. So I do often find myself saying, look, nobody's died, it's fine. It's just we'll move on from it.
That's interesting. I mean, that's interesting. Hearing you talk, I imagine you must be around a lot of emotion a lot of the time,
all the time.
And how easy is it to remain effectively unemotional? I don't mean that you don't care at all, and I'm sure you deeply care, but maintain a level of well, how do you deal with that situation on a regular basis?
That's interesting, actually. I mean, I think that you have to learn how to do it. That's one of the things, working with younger members of staff, you have to find your own way of coping with that. As a profession, we're pretty poor at it.
Yeah.
It's quite macho, the law. Well, it's very macho. And, it's all kind of gung-ho and everybody's busy and, makes a fortune and, got multi-million-pound cases and all the rest of it. And in that to survive in that environment, you have to do a bit of that yourself. Well, I don't so much now, but I think in the early days you have to, because you want to fit in.
Yes.
What is starting to become something in family law is supervision, and I don't mean supervision as in supervising somebody's work. I mean supervision in the therapeutic sense, whereby you get an opportunity to speak to somebody about the impact on you of all of that.
Yeah.
So in mediation, you have to have a professional practice consultant, and that's kind of a little bit like that, although it's more about issues in particular cases and how you might deal with that. But I have recently started doing an hour a month personal supervision with a qualified supervisor who is also a qualified, she's a family therapist, but she's also a qualified family solicitor. I knew her from donkey's years, don't know her that well. And that's been really beneficial, I think, because I think especially, I'm not, UN Secretary General, but I do have a role within the organisation, which can be a little bit isolating at times. Yep. So to have that opportunity to speak to somebody about, how you really feel about things, it's incredible the difference it's made. It's an hour, it's an hour a month. It's not a lot, really, but you still feel it's a challenge to do it, but I make myself do it.
Right.
And I'm doing it tomorrow again, actually. And there's always a list of things that I'm adding up in my mind that I speak about. So I would be delighted if that became the norm rather than the exception.
Yeah, I guess it's the similarities in part of what I do with working with business leaders is people running businesses aren't able very often to share how they're feeling with the people around them, because they, you don't want to take it home. You don't want to take it turns. You can't share, especially when it's to do with the business success or lack of it. Share that with people around you in a team, and just being able to offload, I think, just as one tiny part of it is really, really valuable. I mean, I know I have my own coach, so it's part of being able to do that. It is an offloading being a word which is really very sensible in terms of offloading that pressure that we often feel on our shoulders.
Yeah, it's offloading, but it's also with somebody with the right training can then dig into. So actually, the reason for this is this. So I would talk to her about a really difficult case. Well, it was a difficult client, actually. Her analogy, I love an analogy. Her analogy was, well, it's not about your legal abilities. She said, you're playing chess with a pigeon. So no matter how good you are at chess, the pigeon will kick all the pieces off and peel all over the board. It was a fairly extreme case, that, but it's that kind of insight that helps you get it into perspective. You think, actually, it's not about, this isn't about legal advice, the legal bit. It's about the relationship, and for whatever reason, the way that person is behaving at that particular time.
Totally, because most of us find it really easy to drop into an emotional and therefore often illogical state. And it's
and that, you know, and we absolutely get that, because the people that we're working with, more than 9 times out of 10, are going through one of the most difficult times in their lives. And that's absolutely understood. But very occasionally you get somebody where there's, you know, for whatever reason, that relationship is very difficult.
Yes. Yeah, no, 100%. And there we found a nice quote which I like there. We've from you. That's playing chess with a pigeon. I do like that. We'll take that one. So what else have you learned about yourself? You know, over the 25 years, but certainly over the last year.
I think I've always known that I like change.
Yeah.
I like to be able to develop and move on with things, and I really, because I'm 59 now, and I've got quite a lot of friends of my age and even a bit younger who are retiring, and they'll ask you if you're going to retire. I find that really tedious. No, I don't want to. I mean, I know you can fill your retirement with lovely things, but a lot of people don't. And I think I feel like I've got an awful lot more energy, and there is a movement within family law. It's been going on for years, but it's gaining a bit of momentum now, about not having different processes in silos. So you either go to court, or you mediate, or you write letters between solicitors, or you do collaborative practice. And the thinking now, and I did some training at the end of last year, which is really giving me the confidence to say, actually, do you know what? No, if we get stuck in a mediation, and it's because you want your legal advisor there, let's bring them into the room, you know. And I've always worked kind of collaboratively, so I'll work with pensions experts and financial advisors and so on, and bring them into the room.
Yes.
But I think what I've learned is that I want to carry on developing that, and I'm not done yet.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. And I think it's absolutely right. You know, what you said, it's about you can fill your life with wonderful things, but a lot of people don't. And part of the reason, whatever we call it, retirement, moving on, whatever it isn't as successful as it could be, is because people don't plan it. You know, it's almost like I'll work really, really hard to a point, and then I'll stop, and then I'll work out then what to do. Well, we have lots of time to plan, and if we knew exactly what we want to do, then for some of us it would be easier. Some of us wouldn't care. We just say, well, I could do those things anyway.
And I like doing, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are stresses, and there are times when I think, oh, I wish I could stay in bed. But I really do love the job. I think, you know, those relationships with all those different people, and I'm enjoying mediation more and more now, where you're more of a kind of, I've always been a problem solver, but in mediation, especially with the kind of new freedom to bolt different things onto it.
Yes.
I really like it. I like the job, so why would I want to just stop when I'm not planning on going anywhere for a very long time?
Totally agree. Brilliant. So looking forward, what does the future look like for you guys, and what challenges might you face, if any?
I think there are always challenges. I think the biggest one is what we've mentioned, which is recruiting and retaining good people, because without that, it just doesn't work. We're not a business.
Yep.
And you know, there are various challenges within the law. There's a consultation at the moment about compulsory mediation, which doesn't scare me, because I'm a mediator and firmly believe that things need to change. The court system just doesn't work. So all of those are challenges. You know, they might impact us in different ways, but we've got to evolve, and just trying to carry on doing what we're doing. Yeah,
brilliant. And you know, when you've got a winning formula, and clearly from your comments earlier about how strong your team are, etc., then it's about continuing to do the same. Change doesn't need to happen if we're doing well. We need to be open always to changes we need to make to balance the external changes, but internal changes doesn't need to happen if we're getting it right, as long as we're continuing to do it. Great to hear. And if are there any new initiatives we should be looking out for over the next year or so from
I think for me personally, it is more developing practice. I've got some ideas in conjunction with some colleagues in other disciplines and also in other firms about looking to create a service whereby a separating couple can come to us and they get legal advice, they get financial advice, they get pension, they get whatever they need, they get a bespoke package.
Yeah.
It stays out of court and, you know, they come out the other end, you know, with what they need and
Right.
with the kind of the fallout that inevitably follows from the court process, avoiding that completely.
Brilliant.
It can be done. It genuinely, I mean, that's there are a lot of cynics. It's a cynical profession, but I genuinely believe and have seen that it can be done.
Yeah.
You know, the separation and divorce is really traumatic. It's really difficult, but it doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something different. But you need to minimise the damage and maximise the you know the starting point, I suppose, for the next stage.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I do quite a lot of work with obviously business negotiation, that sort of thing, which I know, you know, and the thing we always talk about is, look, there should be a win, there should be a win-win, even in what seems like a very challenging situation. We don't have to be combative. Combative runs the risk of becoming lose-lose. You know, if we fight too hard. So let's work out what win might look and feel like, and let's try and move both parties as close to that as possible. I totally understand, you know, the level of emotion that comes with what you do, and therefore that must be quite difficult because, as we said, people tend to revert to emotional, therefore illogical thinking. But
so they're also frightened. The main thing we deal with is fear, but it comes in various different guises. But you need to recognise it's fear. People just need to feel safe and that you get what needs to happen. Even if you can't control the outcome, you can certainly influence how they feel about that and ultimately where they get to.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's quite. And you've probably heard the acronym, but the thing that we use the acronym FEAR being false expectation appearing real, i.e. we think the worst.
Okay.
Most times we've been in fear, we're fearing the fear, or the unknown, not the thing itself. I mean, you know, I used to have quite a strong fear of flying, and yet sitting on a plane, I'm way safer than sitting in my car. Statistically, by a long way. I'd have no trouble being in my car at any point, and it's I can really understand that if we can help them see that it doesn't need to be something that we fear, that hopefully drops the emotive side down.
I had a session of coaching actually with Jules Wyman, who's a confidence coach. So Jules, I always remember one of the things that she said, and it was about making the decision to make this move actually.
Yes.
And I had in my head this scenario about how difficult it was going to be to extricate myself from the previous firm, etc. And she said, so do you know any of that to be true? And I said, no. She said, so you're making it up? I said, yeah. And she said, well, should we make something different up? And we did, and here we are.
Absolutely brilliant. It's a fantastic example. Because what would you prefer it? What would you prefer the truth to be? Well, let's pick that then.
And do you know what it did? It worked in the way the different that we made up. It was how it worked.
Absolutely. There's a lady. She's got a wonderful name. I can't think of her. Just an amazing name. But she has 4 questions, and they are. I'll try and pull them out for a second. But do you know it to be true? And the second question is, do you absolutely know it to be true? What would it feel like if it wasn't true? And what would you do differently if it wasn't true? And it's really interesting. It's something like that. But really interesting questions to ask when we are in those states, because it is very, again, emotion. You know, fear is a very emotional state, and therefore we tend to think logically. It's incredible how the human condition tends to prefer believing things will go wrong than believing things will go right. We naturally do. Most of us do. You mentioned cynicism earlier. Almost everyone has a level of fear of the unknown. Some people it's higher than others, but you know, we can choose, and the future being, you know, an unknown place, but you know, we can choose, we can build that picture, we can choose our truth and relevance. Not an easy thing to do, but it's a lot more pleasant.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll write down those questions, because I think that's probably a more client-friendly way of saying you're making it up.
Let me just find them for you. If you'll bear with me, I know, here we go. Right. Let me find them for you. Here we are. This is a lady called Byron Katie. I said she's had a wonderful name.
Oh.
Byron, Byron, Katie, Katie. So the 4 questions. Is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? Who would you be without the thought?
Okay.
That's useful. She has written a book
thank
called
you.
4 questions. No, thank you for helping me remember. It's a really important set of questions, really valuable set of questions to ask anybody.
Yeah, definitely.
Because most people, you can catch, we do a lot of this in coaching, and you can catch people, because what we call it is they're running their sets of beliefs and they're overlaying what they believe to be true as truths. And that's the challenge. So questioning the evidence, what's the evidence for that belief, is really, really important. But when people say can't, must, those sorts of languages, they've already decided it's fact, not might, could. And if we can turn them into might, could, and therefore what else might or could happen, it can change quite considerably.
And that's my experience of mediation, actually, that, you know, people come in for an initial meeting individually, and more than half the time I will be told that the other person, it won't work because the other person won't be reasonable, and I see that as a challenge. Because actually, you know, if you can, and it doesn't always work, but mostly, you know, people don't want to go down the court, they don't want to fight, and it you know, getting underneath that to the fear of what might be different is what we do in my eyes.
Yes.
Initial meeting.
If it's useful, one of the questions that I find useful is if it were to work, what might it be like? And it's a really open set of questions. So we're trying to go from the specific very much to the non-specific, the abstract. So imagine it had worked, what might we have done? So, they won't have it. Well, imagine they have agreed, what might have happened for us to help them agree? And it just, because it's abstract and it frees the brain up to be creative, because they've, you know, it breaks things down. Oh, wonderful. Well, we've been talking through those things today. So thank you so much. I love making sure I retouch with some of the things that I've learned and often forget.
Thank you for passing them on.
Nicki, it's been an absolute delight again to speak to you, and thank you so much for your time. It's great to see how well things are going for you, and you've got that, you know, you recruited people and you're looking at different initiatives. It'd be great, you know, catch up again in another 6 to 12 months. But for anyone that's watching that might like to contact you or the company, what would be the best way to do so?
We've got, the best way probably to look on the website. So it's just Jones Myers, and that has contact details for Leeds, Sheffield, Harrogate even. I haven't got Sheffield, not yet anyway. No
Next
plans
year.
for that. No plans for that. So yeah, Harrogate, Leeds and York, and all the email addresses. It's quite user friendly, so that's probably the easiest way of doing it.
Brilliant. Well, once again, Nicki, thank you so much for your time, and
absolute pleasure.
All the best for the future. Thank you.
Lovely to speak to you. Bye.